he's trying to multitask, doesn't have time to really focus on anything anymore. And so at the same time, it seems to me, to get news that attracts people, you have to be more sensational or dramatic or cute or interesting, and the amount of time they're going to spend watching it has radically shrunk because nobody has time anymore. And I think that's something we've certainly noticed in our research.
There's got to be a backlash to that, and people are going to step back and say, hey, wait a minute, do we really want this? And maybe out of a demographic, people who are going to do that are not going to be that big a percentage. We don't know. Maybe we're losing them or not. But that's where we have to do the best we can to show that what we're doing is important to our readers. And it's still evolving. I think it's still a period of transition, and I think it's too short to too early to call if the worst possible scenario, which is what you outlined, is going to happen.
Your media organization seems to me to be somewhat unique in that when you write a story, you're really writing for a broad audience, aren't you? I mean, you aren't just writing for business people. You aren't just writing for men or women or people in country X or Y. I mean, the footprint of your media organization is so big, and so many outlets pick you up around the world. But does that huge general audience sort of shape the way that you write stories? Do you make sure you don't get too specific and you keep everything with sort of a wider view, or?
Yeah, you have to do both.
Okay.
You have to please the intelligent reader, or the specialist reader, the expert reader, but also write the story in a way that the person who is not a specialist reads it will also understand the story.
Right.
That's where our skill comes in. It's tough sometimes, but you can't get too specialized. I mean, they're going to have to go somewhere else for that.
Right.
You still have to present the story in a way that's understandable for the general reader, and then you risk losing some readers maybe that way, but because the person who knows a lot of the background may not want to read that kind of story. Maybe they want to go to something more specialized. But I think we try to do both.
Do you get a lot of press releases every day?
Oh yeah, we get deluged with press releases.
How many would you get, do you think, on an average day, just ballpark?
Wow, like dozens, maybe 100 more, because we get faxes from the government, we get faxes from the companies, we get faxes from PR companies.
Right.
Everything.
Do you think the news release is going to fade out with this new media dynamic and everybody online? Do you think that the press release itself is kind of doomed, or do you sometimes get really useful information from press releases? And as the signature statement of a company's corporate communication on a certain issue, do you still find it relevant?
I think we still pay attention to press releases. Whether it's on a paper or not, maybe something else. I mean, maybe
Sure.
You're looking at PR Newswire or your email or
Right.
something like that. So the way you get it is, or you may be even going to the blog of the CEO, or there's actually more things you got to look at these days because of the technology.
Sure.
But the message that's being sent from the companies are what's important. It's not whether it comes on paper or electronically, and you have to pay attention to that. How else are we going to do the news?
Right. Indeed. What's the most interesting story you've ever covered before?
The most interesting?
Yeah.
Well, I like to think the story that I'm doing right now is the most interesting, and I can't talk about that.
That's a great attitude.
But the story that ran today, this morning,
Yes.
if I can talk about that,
Sure.
is about
Yeah.
the diversity program at Nissan.
Right.
And
okay.
people have, because they've talked about it a lot, some other media have done the story, but the way I did the story was a little bit different. I talked to a lot of the women at Nissan, and then the way I thought of the story was that when I go cover Nissan as opposed to other automakers, I noticed there were more women. Like, we'll go cover a car, and the whole team would be women. And so I thought, this is real, that something is going on with this company because it has a partnership with a Western, Renault.
Sure.
And the executive is not a totally Japanese, So, and then sure enough, there was a diversity program, and there were women who were being promoted And so I did a story that way, showing that this was something unique Nissan was doing that Toyota and Honda may not be doing. And I also found out how many percent of management was women at General Motors, which was higher than Nissan. It was about more than 25%, but it's like less than 1% at Honda. It's like 0.4% are female.
0.4%.
Yes. Interesting, right?
Incredible.
I mean, this is not a secret to anybody, but I was the only one who thought, well, what's going on here? This is an interesting story. And then I talked to the women, and they said, you know, they had sexual harassment before, but now they're being promoted and really appreciated. And one of the things they said was, because women are starting to buy cars, then their ability to reach women customers is being valued at Nissan. And then what was interesting was that my editor in New York, I mean, who's a great editor, she said, what does this have to do with promoting women? You know, and then that was interesting, because that showed that to the Westerner, it shouldn't make a difference who's buying the car,
right.
You know. And that was sort of like a blind spot in how I was approaching the story. And then I went back and I realized that even though women were making advances at Nissan, it was still in a different way, or it still hadn't reached the point when it didn't make any difference whether you're a male or a female, which would be the ideal. And because Japan was so behind in promoting women or allowing women to join the workforce, the fact that they were buying cars, that was helping create a change in Nissan. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, that does satisfy all these requirements of what makes for a good news story.
Oh, really? Oh.
I think so, sure. Big company, big names, big numbers, or in this case, like radically small number, that percentage you mentioned. And stories about change, changing times in society, and of course it's relevant to the people reading the story. So, well, on that note, Yuri, thank you,
thank you
very much indeed for joining us here in the program today. And thanks to our audience for tuning in. We'll see you next time on ITV Japan's marketing program.